Happy week 4. Welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak. 2-1 Saints hosting 2-1 Tampa. And hallelujah, Jeff, our boy, our main stud on offense, the hot revved up Camaro, Alvin Kamara, is back for the Black and Gold. And hopefully that can be the spark for this damn offense.
Hopefully. Hopefully, it's funny. We talked to Alvin yesterday in the locker room. Yesterday, I say that, I mean Wednesday. He is just as excited as everyone else to be back. He talked about how he doesn't watch football. That's the interesting thing about Alvin, and he's just an interesting person. He doesn't really watch football. He plays football. Tyrann Mathieu was like that too. When I asked him, like, did you watch a lot of Saints games growing up? He's like, no, I was playing football. I didn't watch football. And so, spending time away from the team, he's like, well, I had to watch it because it's my team, but I just not well. I was not doing well watching it as a fan, especially just it was good week 1 and week 2 because they won, but watching that collapse in week 3 was not, and you can imagine for Alvin that was not particularly fun. But we're going to talk a lot about Alvin in this segment, kind of our expectations for how he can change this offense a little bit, how he can help open things up regardless of who's at quarterback, whether that's Jameis Winston or Derek Carr. We've talked a ton about the Derek Carr injury this week, so we don't really need to get into any more about that. We're going to have to wait and see. There's going to be a smoke screen. We're going to go from there. But we're in the second segment, we're going to catch up with JC Allen. He's a reporter and writer for Sports Illustrated Bucs Game Day. He's going to give us kind of the lowdown. The Bucs are dealing with just as many injuries as the Saints. And so, who's going to play? Are you going to see a Vita Vea, Devin White, any of their cornerbacks? Well, he's going to give us that information. And then we'll close out with picking some X factors, going over some more notes on, the film that I watched this week. And, because, I talked last week before the Packers game that I didn't think the play calling was necessarily an issue for the Saints week 1 or week 2. It was about the offensive line protection. Well, I think that when Derek Carr went down, everything kind of fell to shambles. And, I asked Derek Carr about that because I thought the offense actually, when I went back and watched it, I thought it actually looked a lot more cohesive in that first half than it got credit for. You only had 4 drives. 2 of them were long drives for points. One of them was a short field, but getting the ball at the 40-yard line isn't exactly a guarantee that you get into the end zone. So we'll talk about that. But first things first, let's hear from Alvin Kamara talking about, what it was like watching the offense struggle, not being a part of it, and knowing that so much of what the offense wants to do is contingent upon having him there, right? Not only is he a weapon, he opens up the offense. He makes it more difficult for the defense to just send guys and not worry about someone slipping out on a screen or making them hurt on a draw. It changes things regardless of who the quarterback is. So here's what he had to say about that.
Yeah, it's frustrating out there or not, because with the weapons we have, you feel like the potential we got. Sometimes when you see it not come to fruition, it's annoying. But it's a lot of things. It's player error. Everybody wants to blame coaches, but it's some things we got to execute better. Some things we got to pull out. So it'll be good. We'll be all right. Get on track.
And yeah, I think again, you look at it and the players are the guys on the field. You can blame the coaching all you want. You can blame the play calling. The coaches can't go out there and make sure that Andres Pete is blocking the right guy on a screen. That's got to be Andres Pete doing that. And that's what happened on the play right before Derek Carr got hurt, is they have a screen set up perfectly. Kendre Miller catches a high ball, makes a nice play on it. And all it's going to take is Eric McCoy and Andres Pete. They are both out in front. They both go for the same guy and leave the outside defender unblocked, and he comes up and makes a tackle. That's execution. The play was correct. The call was correct. The blocking failed. So, I think, it's not all going to be solved by Alvin. But at the end of the day, the players on the field have to play better. And I think, these guys understand that. And they're not going to sit there and blame, Pete Carmichael for them screwing up. They have to play better. And so hopefully Alvin, I think, he's an understated guy. He's not a guy who's going to go out there and go yay, rah, rah. But when he talks, people listen. And I just think that he is a leader of that offense, whether he's a team captain or not. And I expect things to be a little tighter with him in there.
Yeah, he's definitely a lot more outspoken than, say, like a Marshawn Lattimore, but he's got that same swag factor about him. I don't know, guys want to hang out with him. You want to be around Alvin.
Hang out with him?
But I totally think that, yeah, his presence is huge for this offense just because, to me, he is still the top weapon on that side of the ball. Chris Olave is probably right up there with him, but still, Alvin's definitely a more dynamic player that can do more for you. And this offense needs some kind of spark right now, but it's not going to help if they're not blocking for him either. So that's another one. Obviously, we're going to need to see, going forward in this game. And Tampa's front, we're going to talk about this every week, I guess, because it's going to be another difficult front to face because Tampa's no slouch either on the defensive side.
They aren't, but that's only true when you have your players on the field.
Sure.
And we're gonna talk about this. Vita Vea, Devin White, Carlton, what's his name? Carlton Davis,
and
Jamel Dean,
right? Right.
I mean, all these guys are on the injury report, and if they're not out there, I guess we could say last week we were like, man, no Aaron Jones, no Christian Watson, no David Bakhtiari, no Elton Jenkins, and one thing you'll say about the Packers is if you go look at PFF, they have the number 1 ranked offensive line in the NFL despite not having those guys. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to say that? And you saw that in the game. Like, the Saints got pressure, but there's an art in allowing pressure, right? Like, you are not going to win every time, but you have to win enough. Like, it's not either you win or you lose as an offensive lineman. It's okay, you get beat, but did you get beat in a way that literally he has a direct line to the quarterback, or did you get beat after kind of forcing him to loop around so that the quarterback has a lane to escape? And that's what the Saints haven't done. They haven't. When they lose, they lose instantly, and they lose in a way that the quarterback has nothing. They cannot escape. So I mean,
and Carr's not really that mobile. I mean, he can move, but he's not looking to take off.
Yeah, he wants to stay in the pocket. One thing that I kind of looked up, and because we hear the coaches talk about this, is down and distance, getting manageable third down situations. And I think it's kind of just one of those cliches. It's a trope that the coaches throw out there. It's true. It's actually fair. And while you can blame that on the coaching being in bad situations, holding penalties, stuff like that, that's not on. That's tough. But Derek Carr was sacked 7 times between week 2 and week 3. There was 1 sack on Jameis Winston. It came on 1st and 14. 4 of those 7 sacks came on 3rd and 9 or longer. One of them was 3rd and 6. So, like, the sacks are typically coming in situations where Derek Carr is holding the ball a little longer than you probably want him to because he's trying to make something happen. And he also got sacked on a 3rd and 15 against the Titans. And so, like, that's the common denominator here is he's willing to hang in the pocket and he's willing to take a hit and throw the ball. But, like, man, it's got to be worth it. So again, I promised we wouldn't spend the whole time talking about Derek Carr's injury. But, you look at the offense and it's like, what has been limiting them? It's like, dude, does it seem like any defense is respecting the run game in the slightest?
Not at all, right?
No. And so, like, to me, it's like, if you can, even just the threat of Alvin alone being out there makes a huge difference. It does.
No, right. Like the one I think defenses had to respect the most is when you see Taysom Hill lining up, for QB power.
Yeah, when you're running that zone read with Alvin, right? Like, we've seen, in that game, you saw Taysom run a zone read with, I want to say it was Kendre, and he actually gave it, and Kendre picked up 5 yards, but that's because the defense just went straight at Taysom. They didn't even consider that he might hand the ball to Kendre, and it worked. But again, it's like, you want that ball to go to Taysom, right? There's a stat out there that when Taysom gets 40 yards or more rushing over the last 2 years, the Saints are 7-0. When he gets under 40 yards, they're 2-11. And while there's kind of some baked in, imbalances there in the sense that when the Saints are ahead,
right,
they're going to run him more. So, like, he's gonna, like, in a game they win, he's almost always going to have 40 yards. It's impossible to ignore completely. Like, you have to understand that if you can get Taysom working it affects the defense. And one way to make it easier to get Taysom working is to force them to have to account for Alvin in that zone read, is to force them to have someone tailing Alvin out of the backfield because they know you can throw him the ball. You can get him the ball in so many ways. The frustrating thing is all throughout camp, I kept talking about, man, the Saints are running a lot of like wheel routes, a lot of downfield passing concepts to take advantage of Alvin in the passing game. And wouldn't you know it, the second Alvin gets back, Derek Carr is probably not going to be out there to run some of those. And I'm not even sure if you should, because I think you probably need him to hang in and block as opposed to go out on a slow developing wheel route. But it's just one of those things that Alvin, I would argue, is the best player on this football team. Totally maybe agree. Marshawn, at least definitely on the offense
for sure.
And when you don't have that guy, it's noticeable. Look you watch the Giants play without Saquon Barkley. Does that look like an offense that can score ever? It changes the equation. And so hopefully, my hope is that not only are you getting Alvin back, you're getting Alvin fresh. You're getting Alvin not having taken all these hits. And so he's going to be able to play in 14 games. 7 of them come on the front side of the bye week. 7 of them come on the back side of the bye week. And so hopefully you're going to be able to have a full season where you're not worried about Alvin's availability. You're getting fresh Alvin. You're getting like college Alvin, where he's only worried about.
He totally mentioned that. I thought that was great.
I feel like college again. I'm fresh. I'm real fresh, Clancy asked me if I was bored. I was like, I wouldn't say I was bored, but I was definitely thinking like, okay, well, that's 3 less games where I'm taxed and kind of taking that load and taking those hits. So,
and I think that's fair.
Clancy Barone?
Yes.
Okay.
Tight ends coach.
Yeah. That's what I was like. What?
That's how I read it, Clancy Barone, or that's how I understood it. I don't know of any other Clancys.
No, exactly. So that's what I was thinking too. I'm like, okay, the tight ends coach was talking to him, I guess.
I mean, that makes sense because you're talking. It's just the tight ends have to block. They have to work with the running back. If you want to screen, the tight ends have to. So I think that's probably he probably was saying, "Hey, welcome back," and then he was like, "Hey, are you bored?"
Gotcha.
But yeah, and I mean, so Alvin has missed an average of 3 games over the course of the last 2-3 seasons. So it's like you kind of bake in 3 games missed with a running back. You kind of have to because of the workload and the type of hits they're taking. So if the result of this suspension is that from week 4 to week 11, you get a fresh Alvin, a game-changing Alvin, as opposed to a guy in weeks 10, 11 just limping to that week off. I think that could, you're okay with that, knowing that you started 2-1 without him. I'm excited to see him. That's the thing. I think Alvin is not only an elite player who helps you on offense. I think him just being there just gives you confidence. I don't know. I think there's value in that. I don't think that's a tangible thing. Is we got Alvin. I remember I don't know why this is kind of random, but when I was growing up, I was a big UConn basketball fan. I'm still a big UConn basketball fan. I remember when Diana Taurasi was on the UConn women's team, and they would ask Gino Auriemma, was like, "What makes you so confident you're going to win today?" And his answer was, I'm not making this up. You can Google it. His answer, he said it multiple times. He's like, "Because we have Diana, and you don't." And I was like,
"There you go.
That's it." Because it just feels that way. The Bucs have Damian Lillard now all of a sudden, and it's like, man, I feel like the Bucs are going to win because I know that guy can get it done. I know that Alvin can get it done. I'm not asking questions. The only questions I'm asking is, how do we get him the ball, and how can we get him the ball as much as possible in the most advantageous ways? And if I'm a play caller, if I'm trying to come up with an offense, even an offense without my starting quarterback, that is a luxury.
Definitely excited too, just because of the fact last year, even though when he was healthy, Alvin still wasn't Alvin because of that, the case looming over him from Las Vegas. That's all in the past now. Nothing to talk about there. The suspension's even been served. So it's like, Alvin is free at last, ready to break through. And what better time to do it at home against the Buccaneers squad that you're fighting for first place with right now. And the biggest question is, how's that line going to hold up in front of him? Because guess what? Now you're starting quarterback who, we thought was going to be the guy to lead the way this season. I don't know when he's coming back. I don't believe it's this week at all. Do I think Jameis can hang in there and be that stopgap? Sure, but I'm still not confident, though, in Jameis getting the ball to Alvin, if that makes sense.
Well, you know what? The funny thing is, and you mentioned he's free at last. He literally said that. He said, I'm free, figuratively and literally. But, the funny thing, you mentioned getting the ball to Alvin. That week 2 matchup against the Bucs last year, Alvin didn't play. I think he was dealing with a rib injury, if I recall correctly. He was dealing with something. He didn't play. So you had Mark Ingram, and one of the things that happened in that game is Mark Ingram fumbled in the red zone in a position where that's probably Alvin on the field at that point. One of the last times we saw Jameis on the field being effective, and that's not including week 1. Obviously, they had that big comeback in week 1. But if you go back to the 2021 season pre-injury, and I don't think he was ever fully Jameis last year with the knee injury, right? Like you saw him wearing the knee brace. He wasn't as mobile. I don't think he was as confident. But the last time you saw him play very confidently was, I want to say it was week 5, maybe week 6. It was out in Seattle. It had the bomb cyclone, if you recall. And he went to Kamara like 10 times in that first half. And it was and I was like, thank you. I have been waiting for Jameis to, he had played well. He played reasonably well, but he had never really incorporated Alvin in the way that you want him to, in terms of just, he's a guy that you got to get the ball in his hands. And that game they did, and it's the reason they won. I know he had at least 1 catch for a touchdown in that game. And I think he had 100 receiving yards in the first half, and then they started bracketing him. And that's the thing. Like, if you can get the defense to have to bracket your running back, you don't even have to get him the ball. You've already won, because that means that those defenders are occupied. And so you can attack other things until they have to transition away from that, and you go back to him again. So I'm hoping that the Saints go back to that tape and be like, you see how you used Alvin in this game? That's what we need to do. Like, that's how we need to win with Alvin out there. And so, Alvin got asked about Jameis, and this is what he had to say.
I mean, like I said, like if Jameis got to step up and play, I know he you know how Jameis is. He got that energy, and he want to get out there, and he want to do everything that he can to help us win. I think just us being able to rally around him, just like they were rallying around Derek, it's some things that we got to clean up front, like I said, to be able to protect. But as long as we protect Jameis and give him the time and opportunity to throw and give him some of the calls he likes, because I know he's gonna go and stand on the table, and he fiery, and he wants to throw the ball downfield, and he wants to make splash plays. He wants to keep everybody engaged. So I mean, just understanding, there's spots that we gotta pick, and sometimes we take what we get, what they give us, and other times too. Then other times we can take our shots and kind of attack the offense. But if Jameis got to do it, I got full faith in him.
The part that stands out there, it's like subliminal messaging. Sometimes we have to take what they give us. It can't always be a chunk play. And that's what I really want to have instilled in Jameis, assuming he starts, that a first down is a win, right? Like, you don't need 20 yards on 3rd and 3. You need 3. Find a way to get 3. And then we can worry about, okay, how do we pick up these 20 yards, 40 yards on 1st and 2nd down and go from there? If they had done that against the Packers, I think they win that game. There was too many instances in that second half where they just felt like they were going for big plays, when it's like, I just need a first down. The defense just needs a minute to catch their breath, and you're not giving it to them. And so, yeah, like, that's a long-winded way of saying, like, throw the ball to Alvin.
You mentioned that with the defense, and that was one of the problems last season. The offense didn't do them any favors towards the end of the game, and they ended up getting so gassed at the end. We saw some very winnable games slip away easily, and we don't need that to become a trend again, for sure. Running the football, and thank God Alvin is back, because it's been a tough trudge through it all. There hasn't been really any of those big runs that have broken through. I can't even tell you the longest run of the season, maybe 11 to 12 yards kind of thing.
No, they actually had a couple outside runs in this game that were 15 plus yards.
Okay.
I think both Kendra and Tony had 15 plus yard runs.
Nothing in 20s though yet.
And they were all both, I want to say they were both on that drive late in the first half when the Saints, I think it was an 82-yard drive that bogged down in the red zone. And that's the type of thing that you haven't seen is, getting to the outside and really making them hurt downfield. Now, the one question that I have that is going to be interesting to see is, okay, so now Alvin's back. Who is the RB2? Because obviously Jamal Williams is on injured reserve. I think you trust Tony Jones. I think his floor is higher than Kendray's. Like, I think you have a little bit more trust in him from the perspective of pass protection. But how many reps are you going to be asking Tony Jones to pass protect anyway, right? You're going to want Calvin on the field for a lot of passing downs. So is Kendray not the better option? Like, I feel like Kendray, in terms of a guy who's more of a home run threat, where when he's on the field, they're going to assume, that it's not, maybe the play's not going to the running back because you don't have Alvin in there. I don't know. I think he's a little bit more dynamic. And I thought, I mentioned this on the Monday episode, and it only was reaffirmed by actually watching the game. I thought he was solid in his debut in terms of looking looking the part. Right, he didn't look overwhelmed. There was no point that I was like, man, if that was a different running back, he breaks that. There was one or two questionable reads. Maybe he missed a hole, but he did the simple things well, and that's what you need to do as a rookie to get on the field. And no disrespect to Tony Jones, I love Tony. I think he's going to be on this roster at least until Jamal gets back. I think that Kendray should be, getting the bulk of those second string reps at running back.
I think he'll get those snaps for the running back, but like you mentioned with Tony Jones, they'll definitely trust him more for those blocking scenarios where I think because of that, they'll end up having pretty even snap wise. So it'll be like 2A, 2B running back wise for me, just because, you're still going to need Miller, his dynamic presence on the field, but I think, Tony Jones blocking ends up putting more value on him. And it's funny, we didn't bring up Traquan at all. Obviously,
I talked about him on the
okay. It's just funny now when you seems like this team needs blocking most. We've gotten rid of one of the best blocking options on offense.
Yeah, that wasn't lost on me. But again, like the issue isn't blocking on the edges per se. It's Traquan's not lining up in line at tight end. So yeah, but I think the way you're going to see Tony utilized is, maybe I think Deuce calls it like two pony, where you have two running backs out there. Like, I think that's probably where you can take advantage of Tony in heavy formations, right? And when you're going jumbo and you're just trying to block and you're trying to get the ball to Taysom for a run play, I think you take advantage of him there. But yeah, I don't want to, I want to see Kendray's confidence continue to build, because if there's a point,
I think they do too, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, of course they do. Right, he's a third round pick. Like you pick a guy in the third round because you expect him to contribute. So to me, I think he showed that he's ready. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at is, and I'd like to see him. He hasn't been able to practice with Alvin the last 3 weeks, right? Like, they worked together a lot in the preseason, but he didn't get to pick Alvin's brain really before that game. So maybe that's something that he can kind of watch and learn a little bit more. And anyway, I think I'm very happy to see Alvin back. That's all. This is a very long segment that boils down to, yay, Alvin's back. And I think Saints beat the Bucs, and we're going to hear from JC Allen in a minute here. I think they should be confident going into this matchup. And even without Derek Carr, I think you should be confident that you can go out and win this game, that you can harass Baker Mayfield, and that you can put points on the board. At home in front of your fans, they're going to be loud. And Chris Godwin already said that he's afraid of them, basically. So
that was very interesting comments from him. It's like, wait a minute, Chris, you sounds like you want to come play for New Orleans almost.
A little bit. Kind of sounds like he's like, yeah, when I play at home, it's like they, it's an open stadium and all the air goes out of the building and everyone sucks. That wasn't a direct quote. That was me paraphrasing, in case anyone was wondering.
Yeah.
But all right. Let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back here on Inside Black and Gold, talk to JC Allen, reporter for Sports Illustrated Bucs Game Day. And and then we're going to come back in the final segment and get into some X factors for Saints-Bucs in week 4. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Follow us on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak, at Steve Geller WWL, at Saints_pod. And if you haven't subscribed yet on YouTube, do that at WWL Sports. WWL.com is the website. Latest Saints content. Got an interview up with Mickey Loomis today. Mike Haas did that. It's a pretty interesting interview. Anytime your GM has to explain a 17-point collapse in the fourth quarter, and it did not disappoint. So go check that out. We will be right back. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak, along with Steve Geller, as always. And as promised, we are bringing in JC Allen, reporter / writer for Sports Illustrated. Bucs Game Day, going to get us ready for Week 4 Saints-Bucs at the Superdome. And my first question, JC, if you were handicapping it, what's the over/under on how long it takes for Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans to get into a fight?
Oof. Well, they don't play on special teams, so the kickoff is out of the question. But depends on
never know.
Depends on who gets. If the Bucs get the ball first, you're looking at maybe 3 plays in.
Yeah, because I'll never forget, like, that was such a strange game. It was so close, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, the 2 best players on, or like 2 of the best players on each team are suddenly not here anymore, and it seemed to change. But, you know, in more seriousness, what have you seen from the Baker Mayfield offense so far? It's funny because you look at the Saints, and they went from the Drew Brees era to Jameis to now Derek Carr, and the Bucs are kind of doing that. They thought they were going to have to do it last year, and then suddenly they didn't, and now they're on Baker Mayfield. So how has that gone so far?
Yeah, it's had its ups and downs. I think Baker Mayfield, when you look at his career, never really got a fair shake. 7 different head coaches, 6 different offensive coordinators before he came to Tampa. It's really hard for anyone to excel in that kind of atmosphere. The last time he did have an excellent season was in 2020 in a similar system that Dave Canales is running here in Tampa. And he's been really good, on third down against pressure. He threw his first interception of the year this past weekend, but done a really good job at avoiding sacks, extending plays, only sacked 3 times on the season. So it's still a work in progress. They're still all learning this offense together. They started with a really slow install in the offseason. Then they're still installing and kind of figuring out how everything works together. The offensive line is still gelling together. So I think we've only kind of seen a tip of what the offense could be. Now, again, there's a lot of young players and young pieces on this team. You have the stalwarts like the Mike Evans and like the Chris Godwin on the outside, but the rest of these guys are still finding their way as NFL players. A lot of them are second-year guys or rookies and having to be relied upon for an impact. So I think it started well, 2-0. That Eagles game was one that not many people, unless you were kind of delusional, thought the Bucs were going to win. They kept it interesting early on with a couple, really tight stops down in the red zone, and then it kind of just all fell apart from there. I don't know if it was the rain or a combination of that Eagles team just being so dominant on the front 7. But this is an opportunity. I think Bucs fans look, and Derek Carr not potentially being the quarterback this week might be able to kind of get back on track before their super early Week 5 bye week.
What is the general feeling from fans about the whole departure? Obviously, Jameis Winston, and now that potential, probably going to see him on Sunday. I don't see how Carr ends up playing in this game. Right. I don't care what grade the sprain is, kind of deal. Unless it just was something so minor that happened in Green Bay, but it certainly doesn't seem that way, at least. But just the overall, I'm wondering. Yeah, what do folks think of with Jameis Winston? Is it kind of like it'll be like a happy homecoming for him?
I think it's torn. I think there's like a good 20 to 25% who feel the same way that I just spoke about Baker, that Jameis didn't really get a fair shot at all, and that he should still be the franchise quarterback, and the Bucs did him dirty and everything like that. And you still got your supporters. The other 75% is like, okay, well, we've got 2 interceptions coming this week already, so book those down. And Jameis is going to find ways to beat himself and take the Saints out of this, a la Week 2 of last year. Right. So a lot of Bucs fans are kind of looking at their chops at a game that me going into the season personally, I had this as a loss. Now I'm starting to reevaluate because Jameis Winston at quarterback and Derek Carr, 2 different guys.
Yeah, we seem to have like this really intense. I think it's really the one side that this Jameis support staff, especially, I don't know if you've seen him on Twitter, Mr. Jameis 1 of 1.
Oh yeah, got into
Yeah,
it a few times with him.
yeah, he's happy to jump on any kind of stat and twist it anyway to seem like Jameis is is definitely a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
It's funny because Jameis, I've always said this thing about Jameis is he's got all the talent in the world.
Yeah.
The decision making is what's held him back his entire career. What
Absolutely.
continues to hold him back. If you put a processor on him like, and I know it's rare, like Mahomes or someone like that, and he can make all the throws. He can avoid the pressure. He can scramble. He just makes bad decisions, and it goes all the way back to his time at FSU. Goes to his time with the Buccaneers, and certainly since he's been with the Saints, it's been an up and down roller coaster ride whenever he's been relied upon as a starter.
Yeah, I've always said I feel like he would be able to thrive in an offense like Josh McDaniels, where he's going to make the call and you're going to run the play, and whereas Derek Carr didn't work in that scenario because he wants to be making his own decisions at the line. I think it's the opposite for Jameis. Like, you have the talent and you just need someone to be like, no, do this. And I think Sean Payton did that. I think that's why it kind of worked that first year under Sean Payton and it's not under Pete Carmichael. But let's kind of change track here. One thing that stood out to me, obviously the Bucs didn't practice on Wednesday. They had a walkthrough. So there's only so much you can take away from an estimated injury report. But, the names on this injury report, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, I'll skip over Servassier Dennis. I don't even know if I'm saying that name right.
That's right, Pastor Servassier.
Gotcha. Kalijah Cansey, the first-round pick, Vita Vea, Devin White. I mean, these are top and names on this defense. A lot. The only one who actually practiced limited was Carlton Davis. How many of those what injuries do you think are actually a concern? These guys might miss the week. What is kind of your read on that? Because if all those guys aren't out there, that's a huge blow for the Bucs defense.
Right. I think Kalijah Cansey, Servassier Dennis, you ruled those guys out right away. Bucs held practice today. Yesterday was more of a walkthrough, so it's like you're estimating, but Vita Vea was not at the public viewing of practice this morning, so that's a guy to follow up on dealing with a pectoral injury. I honestly think they're going to be without both starting cornerbacks, Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis. I reported a few weeks ago Carlton Davis is dealing with turf toe. They refused to confirm it over there at One Buck Place, but you know how teams are. But that's something that usually 3 weeks minimum. They got the bye week coming. Does it make sense to put him out there? I know Carlton Davis is doing everything in his power to get ready to go because much like Mike Evans and Marshawn Lattimore, he's got a little thing that he wants to revisit, I'm sure, with Michael Thomas, who hasn't been playing in the last 2 years due to his injury. So
he was there last year. I remember that.
Early in week 1, for a little bit, but he wasn't himself. Michael, it's week 2 rather. Mike Thomas was not himself in week 2. And then he ended up missing the rest of the season shortly after that. But, he's going to try to get through it. But again, Bull said, I got to see him run. And I just don't know. You want to win this game, but at what cost? At that kind of point, your bye week is week 5. That means you have 13 straight games to get through. Do you want to turf toe? You don't mess around with it. Do you want to re-injure that? Or I don't think you do. So I think Devin White plays. I think everybody else on that. I think Vita Vea still plays. Maybe he's on a bit more of a limited snap count. But I don't think they'll be with both starting cornerbacks. If Carlton Davis goes, then it's going to be a game time decision type deal, and it's going to be, well, if we got nothing else, they're starting some young guys.
Yeah. So who would be out there if both cornerbacks don't go? Who would you be looking at?
It'd be Zion McCollum and D. Delaney. And they have Derek Pitts. Derek Pitts, rather, who they signed as an undrafted free agent, more of a special teams guy. And they brought in 2 players, William Jackson III, who, first-round pick from Cincinnati, signed with Washington last year, had a bulging disc issue. Signed for like 3 years, $40 million with Washington last year. Ended up getting traded to the Steelers and didn't play, and then they brought in another guy, I forget. He had some limited other end of the spectrum, undrafted free agent, but has some starts under his belt. So maybe they'd sign one of those guys. Bowles has been able to, in the past, get guys like Richard Sherman, Pierre Desir off the street and get them ready to go in just a few days' notice. So I think, today is Thursday. They got one more game. We'll know today by the injury report a little bit, and if they make a signing for someone to come in tomorrow. where these guys are at. I think if one of them plays, it's going to be Carlton. I just think if you're playing Carlton, it's out of necessity, not because you necessarily want to play him. I think they would rather him sit one more week, have the full bye week and 2 weeks, off before the Lions come to town for Creamsicle Day. But they might need him to go no matter what. So,
JC, our run game over here hasn't been anything to talk about, and I'm looking at Bucks numbers too. What's going on with the rushing attack of Tampa this year?
It's just the offensive line still kind of gelling together a little bit. They're not getting a lot of push. The pass blocking has been really good, but they're not getting a lot of push in the run game. It's been aided by the running backs kind of trying to do too much, trying to hit that home run every play, dance a little bit, and not just taking that one cut and going. Giving up, trying to get 5 yards and giving up the 5 extra yards and giving up the 3 yards or the 4 yards, so that's presented in front of you. So it's one of these things they're going to continue to stick with. They're not going to just abandon the run altogether.
Sure.
They want to have balance. They want to wear teams down and burn, seconds off the clock, but it has to get better. They're one of the worst teams in the league right now. The yards per carry is second worst in the league. And it starts up front with the big boys. They got to do a better job of getting some push. Last week, you saw improvement in week 2. Last week was going to be tough no matter what. I mean, that rotation, front 7 for Philadelphia is just it's illegal. It should be at least.
Yeah, so you look at the Bucs depth chart and you see the wide receivers, and obviously Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. That's top of the line. You'd be hard pressed to find a better duo in the NFL. Behind that, who is it right now?
It's Trey Palmer, former LSU guy,
right.
former Nebraska guy. He it was kind of even between him and Devin Tompkins the first 2 weeks, but he really edged out the snaps in week 3, and he's going to be that wide receiver 3 kind of going forward. He's got the speed to stretch the field, which is nice to have on there. But they'll still use a rotation. 1 week it might be Cade Otton getting the bulk of those third snaps behind Evans and Godwin. Could be the running backs. It could be Palmer. They don't have a guy who's literally necessarily locked into that role yet, but Trey Palmer's got the early beat on that, and if he continues to make plays, and again, he's a rookie though too, so it's one of those things where he ran the wrong route that would have been a surefire touchdown against the Bears, and I was just kind of like, what were you doing there? Kind of gave up on a route, so there's going to be some growing pains with him too, but they're comfortable with their room. If they need a veteran, they've got David Moore in the practice squad who they'll call up.
What are, I guess, you would say like a calling card of a Todd Bowles team? Since I know he's been around since 2019, obviously with the franchise, second year as head coach. But what's been the biggest difference having him around leading the way?
I think he's kind of changed the culture a little bit this season as far as coaching style pressure. I mean, Todd, you're going against Todd Bowles, you're getting pressure, and it's coming from everywhere, and he's going to disguise it, and you're not going to know who's dropping in coverage. I mean, he drops Vita Vea in coverage and sends, lines up Alontae David as a defensive tackle, nose tackle. So, you never know what he's doing. But as far as coaching, I think one of the biggest things on him was in-game management, and I've been really impressed with his in-game management so far this year. He had some blunders last year, but like I said, coming into the season, good coaches, good players, review the film, learn from it, and get better from it. And it seems like he's done that so far this year. I think the culture that he's bringing now that he's kind of been able to establish it. Remember last year when he took over, it was April 30th. He couldn't put his own stamp on this team. The staff was in place. Free agency was over. They were prepping for the draft. Even this year, 42% of the Bucs cap space right now is going to players who are not playing on this team, whether that's due to injury or dead money. 42%. Wow. It's crazy. So he still hasn't really been able to put his input on the team. They've had to rely on a bunch of rookies, 13 rookies on this team, 6 of them undrafted free agents. They've got 4 guys who are in basically starter roles as rookies. So, he hasn't been able to, but he's got the team buying in, the culture. One of the biggest things for this team is, and they're grateful for everything that Brady brought. Obviously, a Super Bowl, national recognition, 3 straight trips to the playoffs, 2 straight NFC South titles. But when you reference the Bucs the last 3 years, it wasn't just the Buccaneers. It was Brady and the Bucs. And, some players kind of got tired of that. We're a team here. And I think that team camaraderie, team culture, team, bonding and everything like that, some players got a little bit too big for their britches. Their heads got a little bit big. And I think that's what he's brought back, is that this is a team. We're going to win as a team. We're going to lose as a team. And I think that's one of the biggest things that he's brought back, as a head coach in his second year.
All right, I think my internet's working again, so that's a good start for me personally. JC Allen, reporter, writer for Sports Illustrated Bucs Game Day. I know you're a busy guy, so I really do appreciate the time, man.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Pleasure to come on, guys.
Thanks again to JC Allen for coming on. This matchup is going to be fun. The Bucs Saints matchups are always fun. Cam Jordan would say it's not a rivalry because that's what he says about all the NFC South teams because he likes to gripe. But hey, the Bucs beat the Saints twice last year. He's lying if he says he doesn't remember either game. He's lying. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. So I'm looking forward to it. But that's going to wrap up this segment here on Inside Black and Gold. We're going to come back and we're going to go through X factors for that game, get into some notes from some of the film I watched throughout the week. I can't play them because our powers that be have decided that's the battle they're going to fight, not trying to fix the stock price or anything like that. So that's an Audacy dig, not a WWL dig, but we'll move on. We're going to come right back. Follow us on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak, at Steve Geller WWL, and at Saints_pod. This is Inside Black and Gold. Who dat? Go Saints. Let's go. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. One thing that I didn't get into in the most recent episode, because we were talking about injuries, we did talk to Derek Carr about the first half offense. And, what I think you need to remember is like the first two games, we saw a team that couldn't get anything going in the first half. And then in the second half, they made adjustments. They looked better. They looked more cohesive. In this last game, you saw two extended drives, one for a touchdown, 182 yards for a field goal. And on that drive, you can complain about the red zone efficiency. The first pass got batted down at the line. Not much you can do about that from the quarterback or the play calling perspective. The final pass hit Chris Olave in the chest. And, it was a tight window. He probably could have gone to Mike Thomas in the window behind him, but Chris was open. It hit him in the chest. I think the ball bit him and tipped coming in. So, from the perspective of you want to see this team improve week to week to week, I thought they did. And you never really got to see them make those adjustments in the second half. I think if Derek Carr's in there, you win that game by 3 scores. The defense isn't on the field the entire second half. They get to harass Jordan Love a little bit more. But this is what Derek Carr said on Wednesday when I asked him about the offense as a whole getting into rhythm.
Yeah, we definitely felt like we were, starting better, more efficiently on first and second down. But still with a penalty here, there were still things that we were like, we're climbing, hopefully the peak at the right time, and hopefully we'll just keep working at it and chipping away at it to where it does look like a, finely tuned. We knew it was going to take time. Obviously we all want it right now. And we've had spurts where we're like, wow, this is going to be awesome. But it's consistency. We got to be consistent, everybody, every single play. What is the detail of your assignment, and did you do it or did you not do it? And so I think with that focus going forward and with the group of guys we have, hopefully it will get to where the consistency shows us, the things that we're starting to feel and believe.
And I get that. And I had people complain to me. It was like, well, the offense in the first half sucked too. I don't think it did. I think it was fine. Even you had a 3-and-out in that first possession. There was a sack. The third possession, the one you didn't score on, there was still a 6-play drive. You got a first down, you moved the ball, and then you punted. So, you're not, if you're an NFL team and you're scoring on 50% of your possessions and they're extended drives, they're not short fields, you're going to win a lot of games. So I don't know. I think this offense is closer than it probably feels based on how that second half went.
But unfortunately, now with Carr out, you got to wonder too now how this stunts the development kind of thing. Obviously, because I know there's still no announcement yet; it's not definite, but I'm fairly certain that he won't be running the show Sunday in Tampa. And I don't know what's it going to take to get used to Jameis and then having to get reacclimated back to working with Carr.
I don't know. You've been working with Jameis all offseason. It's
Sure.
not really a question of the offense changing. It's more just the specific game plan you're going into this game with, what calls you're looking at in specific situations that might be different. I think he's going to use Mike Thomas a lot more. I think you're going to see, if I was looking at fantasy and I was trying to decide whether to start like a Mike Thomas versus a Keenan Allen versus like these kind of, short yardage weapons where you need volume and you need, in a PPR league, for example, is like, Mike's going to have way more value than in a standard league. Like I'd start Mike because the way they used him in the second half and the way Jameis was confidently throwing to him, I think you're going to see him have 10 catches in this game, especially if Carlton Davis isn't out there. And honestly, maybe if Carlton Davis is out there, because if he's dealing with a toe injury, I'm going after him. So yeah, I don't know about that, and we'll see. I'm hoping that Derek Carr can be back for week 5, right up in New England. Thankfully, it's not cold, so that'll help. That helps a little bit with the injuries, as Deuce would explain to Bobby. That's an inside joke because they got into a bit of a dust up on that subject. But we don't need to go into that. What do you think though, Steve? I mean, if you're starting Jameis Winston and the offense, kind of looks sluggish in the first half, how, what are you trying to do? What are your goals to get that going?
Yeah, to me, I think you go into this game, you look at both running games have been pretty abysmal, the Buccaneers and the Saints, and I've been waiting for the black and gold rushing attack to get going. And what better time than now with Alvin back in the mix, offensive line woes or not. I just think he's more, he's a step above anybody else, obviously, that's on this roster. He's in the elite class in this league, and just think he can be that difference maker for them as long as you get him some space. Alvin will make you miss, and I think we saw a revitalized AK even in this training camp. He seemed to have that speedy burst that maybe, whatever legal issues last season were keeping him oppressed and weighing him down. I don't know, but I'm expecting Alvin to come back in this one and really show and flex those black and gold muscles and have a big game right off the bat. And when I say big game, maybe a combined 120 yards rushing, receiving, and hopefully a TD.
That's a big game. So do you think that the legal issues were literally weighing him down? Like it was like he was dragging something behind him, like a sail?
I do, honestly. I think that it was just something. It was something that's ongoing, and as much as you want to say you compartmentalize and you move on, it's not a situation he was used to being in. And it was just uncomfortable because I'm sure he was embarrassed by it. I know his mom was embarrassed by the whole thing. So I'm hoping, and I don't think it'll be the case, where we see Alvin in any kind of trouble like this in the future. And yeah, he's just the guy that he has that special talent that other guys don't. And I feel like being free of any kind of worries, what's going on in your personal life, will definitely help translate that to the field.
I agree with you. And so like, I imagine if I asked you who your X factor was, that would be the answer. So
it's definitely like combination with him and like that. The O-line's got to help. It can't be any worse.
I agree. So let's say that's your offensive X factor. We can kind of seamlessly transition into the X factor conversation. But so to me, one of the interesting things to me, if you go back and watch that Bucs game from week 2 of last year, Jameis wanted to go deep. And, a lot of people questioned that, but it's based on the looks you're getting. And if the Bucs try that again, one of the things you did not have in that game was Rashid Shaheed. And, like a lot of the deep shots went to Olave. And while I like Olave downfield, I think Olave is really a really good guy to target downfield. When it comes to when it comes to just acceleration and getting by somebody, I like Rashid better. I like Chris Olave in, at the top of the route and transitioning. But I think like in terms of top end speed, in terms of being that guy where you just put it out there and let him run under it, I always thought Jameis's connection with Deontay was actually pretty impressive, right? And so if they try that again, the way they covered Jameis, which I think they will. I mean, it worked. They'll probably say like, okay, let's see if he can beat us. I think Rashid's going to be the X factor. I think if you allow him to run behind the defense and you let Jameis just crow hop and sling it, obviously you're gonna have to protect. It always comes down to that.
Right.
And I don't want to see them. I don't want to see the Saints constantly running 7-step drops trying to hit a go ball. But if you set it up and you get the looks you want, and you're hitting Rashid on these deep balls, that's gonna. We saw how much at a premium points were in that game last year. One of those hits, and that changes the entire dynamic of the game. And if there's one thing I believe in with Jameis, it's that he can sling it. He's got an arm. That ball comes out of his hand like it's shot out of a cannon. And so to me, that's the X factor is, can you hit some of those deep shots? Because the Bucs have a good defense. The Bucs they're gonna make things kind of ugly. It's gonna be a rock fight to some extent. And so how can you find a way to take advantage of that, where they're trying to bring all this ugliness in the middle of the field, and they're going to single these guys up on the outside, and you're going to be able to force that safety to commit to Chris Olave's side, because how do you not, after seeing what he has done the first 3 weeks, and then you're just getting it out there. That's my X factor. I want to see at least one 50-plus yard receiving touchdown, or maybe not a touchdown, maybe just a 50-plus yard receiving play to Chris Olave in this game. And I think that, I'm sorry, not Chris Olave. I mean, he can have one too, but to Rashid Shaheed in this game, I think that's the X factor. If you can get one or two of those, changes the game.
Can we get one reception for Shaheed? Because that was another knock on me for the offense last week.
But that's the thing. It's like he should have had one.
Right.
And the problem is Derek, he missed him per se, but it was because he had to escape the pocket. And, by the time he spotted him running behind the defense, it was too late. He tried to get to him. It was just, I mean, he can only throw so far. Yeah. I think it was like a 50-yard throw in the air. But it was like, he still couldn't. I mean, that's the problem with the fast guys. You gotta make that decision early, because you have to be able to put it in front of them. You can't, it's like the speed doesn't matter if they have to come back for the ball. Then it just allows the defense. It's just whoever can jump highest.
I just feel like we saw in camp. I feel like we saw in camp even that Shaheed's capable of more than just those go routes, though.
Oh, he is for sure. He can run all the routes, but I mean, go back and watch that game from week 2 if you have time and you want to watch the condensed game. Go watch how they were defending it. Every time Jameis went down the sideline to Chris Olave, it had to happen 3 or 4 times. He was open. He was singled up, and they just could not get the timing down. And like, to me, that's like, if they hit even one of those, you probably win. You put a lot more pressure on the Bucs offense, because they can't just let Tom Brady sit there and basically punt, because it's like getting the ball out of his hands in 2 seconds. And suddenly they're behind and they have to be more aggressive, and you can tee off on them a little bit. That's how they won that's how they had won all the other games against Tom Brady, is getting ahead and then forcing the Bucs to run some actual offense. That's me. Like, yeah, like Rashid should be a bigger part of the offense than he was in Green Bay. But I mean, what was the offense in Green Bay? Like, there really was none to speak of in that second half. So it's not like you look at it like, man, they were throwing it all over the yard and they couldn't incorporate Rashid at all. Like, no, they were just hanging on for dear life. I think he'll, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure we'll talk to Pete Carmichael later today. And I'm sure he'll be like, that's on me. I think this.
Exactly. You got it. I think this. That's on me. I've got to be better at getting the ball into our playmakers' hands. And I think you'll see that going forward. There is only one football, though, and we're trying to spread it around as much as we can.
That's the problem. There's only one football. It's only 1 minute and a minute. Anyway, so let's switch over to defense. It's going to be interesting because there's some injuries on defense. We talked about this in the podcast yesterday. Is Jordan Howden. I don't know if he's going to play. He's dealing with a finger injury. Obviously, Marcus May is out. Paulson Adebo still dealing with that hamstring injury. So, the Saints are going to have to make some replacements on their own. What I'll say for the Saints is, I thought Isaac Yiadom played very well. He was getting targeted. That's the problem. When you're playing across from Marshawn Lattimore, I don't care how good your coverage is. They're going to throw it at you. So you got to be ready.
Right.
Like, you can't just say, like, I got this guy blanketed, the ball's not coming. Well, you got to still be aware that ball might come your way, and they're going to be like, well, I'd rather if I have to throw up a 50-50 ball, I'd rather throw it up to the guy who's not wearing 23. So that's me. But in general, I think that there's a lot to like about what the defense has done. But if you had to pick one player specifically who you think could swing this matchup, who would it be?
I'm calling for his first career interception this game against good old Baker boy. I thought Alontae Taylor was hella impressive. A lot of pass breakups last game, and penalties aside, obviously, but just a guy that's got the confidence. I love just his approach to the game, what he brings, even, the mentality, the attitude. And I see him getting closer and closer. And I'm going to speak it into existence on this one. He got his first sack, obviously. We need the man to get his first pick of the year. And perfect time in the Superdome, Baker Mayfield. I am not at all a Baker fan, if you haven't guessed. And so I've been shocked on how, I hate to say it, impressive he has been to start the year. I'm glad Philly was able to get to him.
Yeah, he looked very much like the Baker Mayfield. I hadn't watched either of those Bucs games to start the year, but all I heard about was how great Baker looked, and then I watched that game against the Eagles, and I was like, "Oh, there's Baker. That's the guy. I remember him." Then that's not to take anything away from his first 2 weeks, but I can take away something from the Bears, which is they might be the worst team in the NFL.
The worst franchise. I don't even know anymore. They're a complete
their defensive coordinator is gone. Like they just had to get rid of him.
I gotta go.
Very strange. But no, I agree with you. I love the way Alontae Taylor plays the game. I love the way he approaches it, like you said, and he's just confident. I love guys who play with confidence. One of the reasons I love Alvin, because even when he has a bad game, it's like he's not. It's not like he's in his own head about it. He still feels like he's the best player on the football field, and whether it's true or not, he's going to believe that, and I love that. You have to if you don't think that you're the best player on the field, right? You have to be. You can be the most irrational person in the world. Of course, you're not the best player on the field, but I need you to believe that at all times. Michael Jordan was a great basketball player. One of the things that made him great was that he knew he was the best player on the court at any time, regardless of who was on the floor and regardless of whether it was true. Kobe was like that. It's a thing. Dame Lillard is like that. And there's that killer instinct that comes with that I think Alontae has. So, I'm looking forward to seeing the eventual Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor tandem, or heck, even Paulson Adebo. I like Paulson Adebo a lot too. But so if I'm picking an X factor, it's tough. I think one of the reasons that you fell apart in this game down the stretch is you were unable to get Jordan Love on the ground, not necessarily pressure him. I had some people tell me that they didn't get any pressure, and I don't think that's true. They got pressure. He was running for his life a lot of that game. The problem is there were no sacks. There were no situations where, they just got a 8-yard loss on first down. It was, he threw it away, or it was he just chucked it out of bounds. There was that one weird play where he kind of stumbled 3 times, and Romeo Doubs was wide open, and he just could not get him the ball.
And he just kind of chucked it up, and like you said, he was wide open there. I was like, please don't complete that.
Yeah, it worked. It was a great play call, and the Saints got bailed out. And I think, we talked really glowingly about this pass rush through 2 weeks, about Carl Granderson. I don't think it was his best game. I don't think it was the pass rush's best game. And they've traditionally struggled with guys who can run around. We've seen that. We saw that with Jalen Hurts. We saw it with Lamar Jackson. We saw it with Josh Allen, right? When the quarterback is able to scramble, not necessarily run, but scramble and extend plays, the defense, I'm not going to say they quit, but it seems like there is an athleticism mismatch with the Saints pass rushers. And I think that's part of the reason you brought in Isaiah Foskey, because he's a bit more athletic in terms of being able to chase guys down. I think he was only on the field for 11 snaps in that game. He had 4 tackles. And so, nice to me, that's
that
the
arrow start going up for him for sure. After we got bashed all training camp.
Yeah, he handled it well. But no, so to me, a guy like Carl Granderson, I need you to not only get there, but I need you to get him down. That was the thing. Marcus Davenport, we all trashed Marcus Davenport. That was why. It wasn't because he wasn't creating pressure. It was because he wasn't finishing the job. He was not getting the quarterback to the ground. That's what they were able to do to Bryce Young. That's what they were able to do to Ryan Tannehill in key moments. Got to be able to do that to Baker Mayfield too. And it can't be like anytime you face a quarterback with some athleticism, suddenly your pass rush is ineffective. Like you can't ask guys to cover man to man for an entire game for 10 seconds and expect nothing bad to happen, right? And I think that's what, down the stretch of games, if you are not playing complementary football from a rushing cover perspective, it's going to burn you. That's just it's a product of the way the Saints play defense. So, I think that's what I'm looking at is, can Carl Granderson harass Baker Mayfield? Can Cam Jordan get in the backfield and make some plays on the quarterback and on the ball? Then I think the Saints win this game.
Perfect. I love it. Yeah, let's like Alontae get a pick, Carl gets a strip sack. Boom. We got 2 takeaways right there.
Well, I mean, like, that's the thing is, like, people talk about interceptions as if they're in a vacuum. And it's like, why do you think interceptions happen? It's in most cases, it's because the quarterback is hurried, right? is dealing with something else and makes a bad decision, or the throw isn't where he wanted it to be. If the quarterback, it's rare that you see a quarterback sit there with nothing affecting him and just throw a duck to a defensive back. It happens, but it's rare. And in most cases, it's like, okay, you're forcing him to speed up from where he wants to be. He doesn't spot the safety crashing down. He doesn't spot the cornerback kind of undercutting a route. And that's where you get those interceptions. So to me, those are equal parts of the same, those are 2 sides of the same coin. And they just did not do that well. Like, I thought the secondary played really well against the Packers, all things considered. And considering Jordan Love seemed to have forever to throw in the second half of that game. Yeah,
it was definitely a case for with that front, just like you mentioned, pressure there, but pressure's not good enough if the quarterback's able to elude it and still make a play with his, still getting away, making the throw or picking up yards running wise. And unfortunately, Baker Mayfield can still be pesky. I think he's their second leading rusher right now, but that Bucs rushing attack is definitely nothing to write home about either.
I also think like not enough people are talking about Jordan Love.
Agreed. Right.
Like if you talk to people last year about Jordan Love, they would be like, the Packers have already given up on him. Like they're talking about trading him. Like, well, what can you trade him for? They clearly don't believe in him. They signed Aaron Rodgers to an extension, and like everyone's talking about Tua, everyone's talking about the rookies, the CJ Strouds, Bryce Young. Like, Jordan Love is a good quarterback. And he's going to be a very good quarterback. Like the Packers, they annoy me because they have such a good fan base. Like, I can't remember if we were talking about this on the pod or not, but during the third quarter of that game, they were down 17-0, and they couldn't get anything going. And at one point, they drove all the way down the field and went for it on 4th down and didn't get it. And at that point, it was like, man, they didn't even put 3 on the board to make this a 2-score game. I mean, in Carolina, the fans were booing their rookie quarterback at his home debut by the end of the first half when they only had 3 points on the board. By the end of the third quarter, I did not hear. I mean, maybe there were boos. There can be boos, but I'm standing on the field and I don't hear them. Like, I'm hearing cheering. Like, I give them, that fan base, a ton of credit. Like, I mean, they watched that game go to shit for 50 minutes, and then they were right there. Like, no one had gave up. Like, it was like, I will pile on some fans if they start booing, and then all of a sudden in the fourth quarter they make this crazy comeback. Like, I knew it all along, like, you're full of shit. But I feel like those fans, they were great. I was very impressed, and that's why it annoys me, because you don't get to have good fans and good quarterback all the time. That's not fair. I think Saints fans are great. They've had to deal with terrible quarterback play outside of Drew Brees.
We haven't talked about the biggest matchup this week, which is in our pseudo WWL league where we're facing off. And I don't know if I should put Love in at quarterback.
Are we? Oh man, yeah, I had Aaron Rodgers. I won this week actually, which is interesting because I didn't start a single Dolphins player.
Right.
But
oh man,
my team name is Rebuild Year for a reason.
Yeah, we're like the Saints and Bucs are both 2-1. We're both 1-2 in this league.
I think I'm 1-2, and like I have 3 fantasy leagues. I think I'm 1-2 in all of them. Let's look. I'll pull it up right here. We'll see it.
Everybody loves when we roster bait.
Roster. Don't never say that word again. Is that from the
That's
league?
from the league.
Yeah. No, I'm facing Jimmy
great.
and Gretna.
You got Justin Jefferson. Oh, great. Swell.
Am I playing you? To me, it's showing me Jimmy and Gretna.
Yeah, that's me, Jimmy and Gretna.
Oh, your name is Jimmy and Gretna? I assumed that was actually Jimmy and Gretna.
No. He always calls Sports Talk, so I did it in honor of him.
I thought that maybe he was in the league. That's funny. Yeah, they don't have projections for some reason. But yeah, you have they do. So you're projected for 137. I'm projected for 128. Kenny Walker had a big week for me last week. I wanted to make my team name something along the lines of Brown and Brown or something, but I couldn't come up with anything because I have Amon St. Brown and AJ Brown. Yep. I can start Baker.
Oof. Yeah, I did not put Jordan Love in last week. I've been riding with Gino as QB2 because we got a 2 QB league here.
I mean, I guess Jordan Love did end up having a decent day because he had 2 touchdown passes and the 2-point conversion.
Yeah, let me.
Oh, he ran for a touchdown actually. So he gets extra points on that. So I mean, just the touchdown. So it's 6 points for the rushing touchdown.
Last week he would have got 24 points, whereas Geno Smith put up 15.
Well, no, but like going into the fourth quarter, he probably had like 6.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Like all of those points came in the final 10 minutes. So anyway, I lost one matchup this week by a half a point.
Did you have those points hidden on the bench somewhere? Because I hate when that happens.
I did, and I blame the Saints fans because I put up a poll on Twitter that said, "Who should I start?" And it was Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Kendrick Bourne, and Tank Dell. Now I would have started Tank Dell because my man crush on Tank Dell. Like the last 2 wide receivers that I was all over in the draft, and I have mock drafts to prove it, that the Saints did not take, and I wanted them to. Amon St. Brown and Tank Dell. The other one was Chris Olave, who they did take. So I think the Saints should start coming to me and saying, which wide receiver do you think we should draft? Because if they had Amon St. Brown, Tank Dell, and Chris Olave, I feel like we would be having a completely different conversation about the Saints offense right now. But what was the question? Oh, yeah. So obviously the Saints fans were like, play Rashid, you know? And I was like, you know what? I asked the question. I have to go with the result.
Sure.
The problem, and then I had people responding to me after the punt return being like, oh, did you start him? Are you glad you started him? And I was like, yeah, that's exciting, except that's the only points he got, you know?
I mean, at least you got that. It was minimal, but it wasn't at least a goose egg, totally, thankfully.
Yeah, but did you see what Tank Dell did?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so he was on my bench.
Ouch.
So last time I give you guys any chance, last time I take advice from you homers, don't call me a homer anymore. That's it.
And plus, you know what? Honestly, having a Saints player too on your roster makes game days even that more fun. Obvious, you know.
Yeah, I know I do. I mean, I always draft at least 1 or 2 Saints players because it's just more fun. And honestly, those are the players I end up with a better read on anyway. So
the way this offense is going, I'm thinking, man, I should have Blake Groupie because it looks like a lot of field goal attempts this year.
I only got 1 in week 3.
Yeah.
And he missed 1.
Right.
Anyway. All right, that's it. The last 10 minutes of this podcast was complete trash. And we talked about nothing. And that's okay.
It'll be the most popular segment now.
I don't think it will be. But that's all right. They can't all be winners. But we got it done, man. We got it done. We got through this. We've been recording for 90 minutes somehow. Even though this podcast is not 90 minutes, I'm going to cut that out because there's like 25 minutes of us just talking in between segments. So yeah, and you don't get any of that, listener at home.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. All right, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. I think a lot of you do, and you say mean things, and no, that's not true. Only some of you, and then you know who you are. And you can follow Steve on Twitter at Steve Geller WWL. Check out the latest Saints content at WWL.com. You can listen to Saints games at WWL AM 870 FM 105.3 and on the free Audacy app. Steve, What's up? You got anything to plug in here?
No, just the we'll be in front of the dome for First Take on game day, 8 a.m. I don't know if fans will be out there that early, but if you are, stop by, please. We'll be right in front of the dome. I think it's right by gate A. I'll have to double check that, but right in front of the dome, facing Poydras Street. And 8 a.m. start. And then after that is the Bud Light countdown to kickoff, where everybody wants to see who, the Cajun Cannon, Bobby Hebert.
You know who, Lord of Voldemort. Yes, that's good stuff. I mean, it's funny because it's like I don't even know if we're gonna be at a Saints game sitting out there at 8 a.m. Everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, why you weirdos? But yeah, I'll be honestly, I prefer doing it from there than the studio because it's closer. I can just walk into the stadium.
That's how I look at it too, right? It's like, I got to be there already anyway.
Yeah. I'm gonna get there earlier doing that there because 10 o'clock I'm already there. Anyway, great stuff as always, Steve. You're the real champion of this podcast. I am just here for comedic relief. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Give us a rating, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you haven't subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast, we're free. We're there. We're doing it. The only thing I ask is that, hey, don't give us a dime. Just suggest us. Do you have a friend who likes to listen to podcasts? Doesn't mind people with nasally voices? That's me. Send it along. Anyway, who dat? Go Saints.
Let's go 3-1, please. Back to winning.
Be easy, y'all. Peace.